Hello there. I'm Caroline Bruce. I'm Training Manager at the Bell Foundation, and I'll be your e-moderator today for this webinar. I'd just like to welcome everybody, including those joining us on the live stream with LinkedIn. It's really exciting to have such huge numbers joining us today for the launch of our free course around integrating EAL and SEND provision in schools. The numbers are a real reflection of the need for this course and the real interest in it. I'm delighted to introduce Glynis Lloyd and Camille Trebiatowski, who will be speaking today. Glynis joined the Bell Foundation in 2022 as a trainer. She worked in English language education as a teacher, teacher trainer, textbook writer, and commissioning editor. She holds an MEd in Applied Language and Linguistics and has undertaken research in literacy and teacher development projects in multilingual contexts in South Africa and Ghana. Her work for the Bell Foundation includes developing and running training, as well as writing articles and guidance. Glynis was part of the team who wrote the Bell Foundation's guidance on integrating EAL and SEND. Our second speaker is Camille Trebiatowski. Camille joined the Bell Foundation in 2018. Before joining, he taught in Poland and then in England and in Scotland. He was an EAL coordinator and also an EAL consultant. Now, Camille holds the post of digital resource developer and as such has been instrumental in developing our online courses, including the Introduction to EAL Assessment MOOC and now this course also around EAL and SEND. We're also delighted to have with us Anna Mason, an experienced EAL coordinator, and Fiona Gallagher, an experienced SENCO, who co-wrote the guidance on our website. You're very, very welcome, Fiona.
Thank you.
So they co-wrote the guidance on the website around EAL and SEND, and it's around that guidance that this course is structured. They'll be able to answer questions either in the chat or at the end of this session. And so, without further ado, I'll hand over to Glynis.
Thank you, Caroline, and hello and welcome everybody. We're really excited to be launching our course, Integrating EAL and SEND Provision in Schools. And, you know, it's a free on-demand course. I'll be talking a little bit about what that means, what it looks like, and what your experience will be. So now I just want to look at on our next slide, just exactly what we're going to do this afternoon, what we're going to cover. So we're going to start off looking briefly at why we developed this course, just to give you some background, some context of what has led us to this point. Next, we're going to look briefly at the aims of the course and how it is structured. And I'm going to give you an overview of the content, what we'll cover, so that we hope that you can reach the outcome of providing, so first of all, recognizing and identifying and diagnosing correctly and quickly where a multilingual learner who uses EAL may also have a special educational need or disability, and that you can strengthen your provision for those children. We're also going to look at share our screen with you, and we're going to show you in real time what the course looks like on Moodle, what sort of experience you can expect, and we're going to explain to you how you can access and enroll on the course. And then finally, as Caroline has mentioned, we will have time for questions. Right, so now I'd like to look at why we produced this course. So the first reason was that we were increasingly seeing the conflation of EAL and SEND in the way that some schools were identifying needs and providing support. And we were concerned that without appropriate resources and knowledge, schools run the risk of misdiagnosing learners who use EAL. So, for example, a learner who seems reluctant to use English as they become accustomed to an English-speaking environment could be wrongly identified as having a speech, language, and communication need, rather than more appropriately being offered language support so that they can access the curriculum and gently encouraged to use English as they draw on the language they already know. So that's our first motivation. Second, we were just getting many requests for support and understanding of this topic. I would say at that point, it was literally the biggest question that people were coming to us at the Bell Foundation with. And as Caroline has mentioned, we then produced the guidance that is on our website, and I will show you a link to that guidance shortly. And that is one of the most frequently downloaded resources, pieces of guidance that we have on our website. So I think that was a second indicator of just how much schools really are looking for this information and guidance. So that was our second reason. Third, then, what we noticed as we began then to scope the work at the beginning of our project, we saw that there are varying interpretations across schools and among practitioners about how best to identify those multilingual children using EAL who also have a special need or disability. And once that's been identified, how best to support them. And we saw that schools were using a range of tools to assess whether a child also has a special need, and schools were often relying on tools that have been designed for children who are fluent in English. And we know then that those tools, that those assessments are not going to provide accurate or reliable information about what in fact a particular child's needs might be. So that was our third motivation. Number 4 was the need we realized for sensitivity and clarity when working with multilingual families. So we're aware that in many countries, SEND is thought of and treated very differently to how we might do it in the UK. In some countries, for example, religious and cultural beliefs might mean that there can be stigma attached to people who have special needs. And consequently, families and young people can be reluctant to disclose that crucial information that schools need in order to provide appropriately for their needs. So we wanted to provide resources and guidance that would support schools in their communications with families and carers. That was number 4. And then last of all, number 5, it was specialists at the Royal College of Speech and Language and language therapists, who really brought home to us the importance of understanding the difference between bilingualism, which increasingly research is showing us provides such cognitive strength and valuable resources as we learn new languages. So that on the one hand, and that it's not confused with or thought to cause or contribute to a speech, language, or communication need, that those two things need to be understood quite differently. So those really provided the context and background, and that led us then, as we've spoken, to this guidance that we developed, the EAL and SEND framework for integrated provision. And the Bell Foundation launched this guidance in February last year, which you can download from our website. There is the QR code. If you have a smartphone, you can use that now to access the guidance. And I'll just give you a minute or two to be able to do that. And then just to say that for those of you who perhaps already have accessed this guidance, had a look at it, you'll know it's a complex document addressing a complex situation. It's long. There are a lot of resources on it, tools and so on. And so on the basis of that, we then decided to design this course to provide an even easier access to the information, to the knowledge, to the resources and tools and so on. Right, so I can now move on to our next section, which is looking at what we're aiming to do with this course, how we have structured it, and what the content is that we're covering so that it meets the outcomes we have set for practitioners to identify accurately and swiftly and provide support appropriately to all learners who use English as an additional language and who also have a special need or disability. So first then, to move to the aims of the course. Why have we designed it? So first of all, we wanted to contextualize the challenges that schools face in doing this work. And within that, to strengthen the knowledge about multilingualism, bilingualism, we kind of use those terms a bit interchangeably, to look at multilingualism and the challenges, but also the opportunities that those afford children. And this was really especially for for practitioners who are new to this work and new to working with multilingual learners. Second, we know from best practice that a whole school approach is essential for accurate identification and appropriate provision. And we wanted to set out what that process can look like and what the advantages are, how that can really strengthen how your school can provide for this particular group of learners. Thirdly, within that process, we wanted to look quite carefully at who are the key role players, what are their responsibilities, so that everyone can be really clear about that and there can be good collaboration and communication between all the role players in that process. And then fourthly, we wanted to, having understood the challenges that schools are facing in finding appropriate tools for this work, and making sure that language barriers are addressed and overcome, we wanted to make tools available that staff can draw on, that they can adapt for the demands of their particular setting. So who is this course for? The course is aimed at school staff in general who are responsible for the provision of support for multilingual learners who use EAL, who also have a special educational need or disability. There are different versions. So we have one version of the course that is directed and designed for senior leaders. That is a shorter course. And then one version for EAL coordinators and SENCOs. And obviously that focuses in more detail on the work that they do on the process, in the process of SEND identification and provision. So next, I'd like to just point out some key characteristics of this course. As we've described it, it's a free course. So this really, we wanted to support those schools with a limited budget and make available and access free to the course. Second, we wanted to keep in mind that teachers are very time poor. So we anticipate that the course for senior leaders will take around 3 hours to complete, and the course for EAL coordinators and SENCOs will take around 5 hours. Because that course, the second one, needs to be longer, obviously, to address all that detail, we've indicated that there are places where some of the tasks could be optional, depending on your role, your experience, on a particular aspect of the work. Then to look at things, points that are more specific to what we call, as I say, this is a free on-demand course. So if we can move on to the next to those next issues, what is specific. So because of the nature of on-demand courses, there'll be no tutors on this course. But as we will show you a bit later, there are tasks that are interactive, and there's tasks where we've prepared feedback. Depending on how you respond to something, you will get feedback. If you need support, for instance, on technical matters, you can then email us at info@bell-foundation.org.uk. And then the big advantages of an on-demand course is that you can start it at any time and you can work on it entirely at your own pace. So whether you do it in a few hours, one afternoon, you block off a chunk of time like that, you're able to do that, or whether you stretch it across days, even weeks or months, that's entirely up to you. And then last of all, the last feature is that the course is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Again, meaning that you can engage with it whenever you want to. And just to note that once you enroll on the course, you will have access to it for 2 years to complete it. And then once you've finished it, if that's still within those 2 years, you can go back if there's an area, a topic that you want to just refresh on, you can do that. So looking now at the course structure. So overall, regardless of which version you're doing, there will be 2 modules. Module 1 is the same for all participants. And then we have a dedicated module 2 for senior leaders and a different and dedicated module 2 for EAL coordinators and SENCOs. And I will go on and explain in a bit more detail what each of those courses covers. So let's look first of all then at the course structure for module 1. As I said, this is for all participants, regardless of your role. You will, first of all, we will look at the national context, looking at, for example, multilingual classrooms now being the norm. We'll look at numbers, sort of estimated numbers of children or learners that we expect to be in this cohort, multilingual learners using EAL who also have a special educational need. And the reality, as I say, of multilingual classrooms. We will look at how multilingualism works. This is in order to strengthen your knowledge and understanding of this, to enable that clear differentiation and to make sure that there isn't that conflation and confusion with a speech, language, or communication needs. We will also look at the factors that affect English language acquisition, the role of English language proficiency in academic achievement, and really looking on very up-to-date research on this that informs our understanding of these issues. So again, that giving you that context for this intersection of language and special needs. And then lastly, as I've mentioned, we'll look at this whole school approach and how that can enable accurate identification of needs and what that approach looks like in terms of roles and responsibilities, and within that, considerations for professional development for all staff who might be engaged in one way or another in this work. Looking now at module 2 for senior leaders. So first of all, we provide a look at all the different audit tools. We have 3 audit tools, one for senior leaders and one for EL coordinators and one for SENCOs. And we give senior leaders just a brief taste of what they look like for those other roles. And then you will complete an audit for your role as the SLT. That will lead you to look at and areas in your provision, in your policies, in your systems, where you may want to strengthen your work. And you link to that, and following on from that, you will then identify priority areas and draw up an action plan. You will also then take a look at the process itself, a broad overview of what EAL and SEND identification and provision looks like to give you a better sense of the work of the EAL coordinator and SENCO in your school. You will look at a program for professional development that you feel may best support your staff. And with all of this, we provide links to resources, to training possibilities that you can access depending on the areas that you identify may be best strengthened in your school, in the way that you're working in your school. And then lastly, there's a focus on the roles of the EAL coordinator and SENCO, so that as a member of the SLT, you have a better understanding of the support that they need from your team. And a key part of this task is an in-depth interview with Anna and Fiona, who we are so pleased to have with us today, where they talk about their decades of work in this field, including the way they've collaborated and cooperated, but also the kind of support that in their role they need from the SLT. Right, and then last of all, the course structure for EAL leads and SENCOs, sorry, the module 2, and what you'll find in your module. So as I've mentioned, for EAL coordinators, there's an audit activity. You'll do an audit that is similar, but with topics that are very specific to your work as an EAL lead, to help you review and assess your work, and to set out a plan for next steps where you might want to strengthen your school's provision. You will look at how you can collaborate best with your school's inclusion staff, and how you can lead teachers who are working with multilingual children. For EAL leads, as I've said, there is a focus on the 4 areas of SEND. We've drawn on the SEND code of practice, where that, especially where this might be a new area for you, and you can get more information and look at indicators, for example, become more familiar with what the indicators might be for in the class, and to enable you then to more quickly identify children you think may have a special need or disability, so that you can then refer them to the SENCO. For the SENCOs, there's also an audit that is designed specifically for your role. And in addition to that activity and the planning that you can then do that flows from that, there's guidance on how you can collaborate with the EAL staff on policy and provision, and on how you can be more aware of and really think about the language considerations in your work, so that you can be more aware of potential language barriers and more quickly and accurately identify those learners who do have a special need and perhaps might need then for you to be referring them on to specialists where necessary. For both of these roles, there are forms, there are checklists, there are examples of procedures you can access and adapt for your setting that will help you at various stages in the process of identifying and provision construction. This includes, just for example, work at the admission stage, how to conduct interviews. We've got guidance on working with interpreters, as well as suggestions for those schools who may not be in a position to access interpreters, on how you can get around that, what alternatives you might be able to use. We've got guidance on considerations at key assessment points, the various stages from early years all the way through to key stage 4, and also at transition points where children are moving from one setting to another, for example, from primary to secondary. And all the way through again, there are links to resources, to information that you can find useful. We also focus in this section on working together, on the real need for collaboration between the EAL lead and the SENCO, how really vital that is, and on key aspects of that there needs to be parity in those roles, regular communication. We've got a sort of an outline of an agenda that you can use for those regular meetings. And then finally, to end the course for those in this role, you'll be able to choose a case study either from a learner in your setting, or we have examples of case studies from all of the phases from early years through to Key Stage 4, where you can put what you've learnt on the course into practice and really get a sense of what this means in reality. As I said earlier, some of the tasks in this module are optional. They really will depend on your role, on your experience, on your knowledge of a particular area. So, for example, where you're already knowledgeable in a particular area, you may be able to skip a task. So thank you for listening to that. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague Camille, who'll take things from here.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you, Glynis. And just to reiterate it, obviously it's great to have you all here, and thank you for your interest in the course. So what I'm going to do is to take you through what types of activities on the course we have, what you can expect. And then following from that, I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll go to the actual course so you can sort of see what it looks like in the actual reality. So let's start with the different types of activities. First, before I start showing it, it was just important to us that you can engage with the tasks and the guidance in different ways and through different media. So in order that the content is accessible to all participants and that it fits with your perhaps learning preferences. So there are a number of videos on the course. Some simply require you to watch them, but others will pause in different places. For example, as you can see on this screenshot here on the right, perhaps just so you can download an appropriate resource that is being talked about. On other occasions, there would be a sort of pause and reflect kind of activities as well. So the video would stop, give you the time to engage with a task, and then you can keep playing it. There are regular videos, and then there are some more interactive videos. Secondly, you will see that a number of activities uses what we call interactive books. So essentially, you will see, as you can see here, you will see a menu on the left to proceed through. So you can click for these different sections. And there will be activities on the right. Some of it will obviously be reading, but there will also be videos, slider activities, something called hotspot activities, which I'll show you on the next slide as well. So I'll talk about that in a moment. In other words, different activities will be embedded within those interactive books. So that's another type. Sometimes, as you will see, that a part of those is optional. You can see this here at the bottom there, where it says optional. The last tab there is optional. So not it again, as Glynis said, it will depend on your role and your context and your circumstances whether all of these need to be required. Okay, so hotspot activities, as I just mentioned, there's a few of them there. In both modules, in module 1 and module 2, the way this works is that you click on a particular area of the image. There's usually a sort of an I button, I for information, and then it will give you either more information, and in some cases our feedback. And so on these screenshots here, you can see there's like a blue button with a speaker. So if you prefer to listen to this text rather than read it, then you can just click that, and you will hear the audio narration there. So you can engage with that in that way as well. Then we've got some drag and drop activities. as well. So these two examples are from module 2. So once you've dragged the items, then you can click the check button at the bottom, and then you can you'll get immediate feedback, and you can redo this however many times you wish. And then we've got some downloads. I'm just wondering if yes. So now these are essentially PDFs, but some of them are editable, which basically means that you can enter the text like you would in a form. So here you've got an example from task 2.15. The last one, that's the task to do is a case study. Last task that ends the course for EAL coordinators and SEND-COs. And so what you can do here is, of course, just write your notes, and then you can save it to your drive. You can print this, or you can obviously download this as well. So that's one type of documents. And then there are some others that are simply just information, and you can simply just download them, and again, print them, save them, but I think it was important to us that you are able to read them straight on the website rather than needing to download them to your drive and read them then. Okay. And then moving on here. So this slide shows an extract from the audit that senior leaders can undertake on the course with the categories that you will focus on in the audit. And the EAL coordinators and SEND-CO audits cover some of those areas as well. So you will use red, green, and amber scale to rate your school in each area, and then you'll get feedback on how you could move forward depending on which color on the scale you chose. So there'll be an activity where you can check check our feedback based on based on your choices, red, amber, or green. And so here are some examples of that. So once completed the audit for your role, you'll have an opportunity to identify the areas that you would like to focus on in your work and to set out next steps that you can take to strengthen your school's provision. And so this slide shows one example of how you can do that on the course. Another example is here. This example is one of the tools that EAL coordinators and teachers who work with multilingual children can use when they suspect that that a child may have a SEND in addition to their language needs, and which that they can use to pass on to the SEND-CO for further investigation. So there's a checklist that the EAL coordinators can use to remind teachers of the kind of information they should gather when preparing a referral to the SEND-CO. And our third example here is one of the tools we provide for schools to use to consider the needs of learners using EAL who have SEND, who are at a key assessment point. In this example, in secondary schools, there are examples for other phases, of course, where they may be preparing for GCSEs or undergoing reading tests, sorry. For example, we flag the considerations needed for both the EAL coordinator and the SEND-CO. For example, how to make sense of outcomes or what access arrangements to a learner might qualify for writing GCSEs. Okay. And then finally, feedback. So inbuilt in the course are different ways of providing feedback to you because there are no tutors on the course. As Glynis mentioned, because it's an on-demand course. So there will be different ways that you will get feedback. So for instance, the previously mentioned hotspot activities include our feedback provided in textual and audio form. So I was talking about the audit just a second ago. So once you've carried out the audit, then you can click on the color RAG of based on your answers, and you will receive our feedback here. And there are also in the drag and drop and questionnaire activities. You will receive immediate feedback on how you did. One such example is task 2.7b, that's from the EAL coordinators and SEND course. And you can see the feedback in action here, just an example there. Okay. And finally, at the end of the course, this is right at the end of module 2 on both the courses, we will ask you to complete our course feedback, which is embedded into Moodle, and it takes only 5 minutes to do, and obviously this will allow us to keep improving the course and other such courses in the future. Your views are always very, very important to us. And following this, you'll be able to download a certificate. This is an example of that for the SLT Senior Leaders course. And of course, depending on which course you're taking, it was Senior Leaders or EAL Coordinators and SEND goes in the title there. And there will be different number of CPD hours shown there. Now, it is important that when you register for Moodle, that your profile states your actual first name and surname for the certificate purposes, because it just simply fetches your name onto the certificate from your profile. So, but then if something doesn't quite work, you can recreate the certificate however many times you want, as long as you've completed all of the required activities before. Okay, so now I'm going to leave the presentation, and I'm going to show you a couple of pages from the course, and we're going to look at this live. So I'll stop sharing the let me just see if I can and show. Okay, and hopefully I wasn't logged out of out of there, so hopefully everyone can see that. So let's start by accessing the course. So if you go to our website, the Bell Foundation's website, if you navigate to our work with schools training, and here you've got free on-demand training, and there's 2 courses there, and the one we are talking about here is here. So if you click on that, it will take you to the page for this course, and then at the bottom there are 2 links here. Sign up for the course, and obviously, as you can see, you have a choice between Senior Leaders and EAL Coordinators SEND-Co's. So that will take you to the login page, and you can register from there and then enroll yourself on the course. And when I go back to the presentation, the slides in a few seconds, I will show you how to do that as the last thing I will do before the questions. But I'm going to show you a couple of pages from the course. So we're talking about interactive textbooks. So here is one such example. This is from the SLT course. So you can see that you can move through these tabs. There are some videos embedded. So you would move through these one by one until you see that everything here has this black dot, which means it has been completed. You can move between pages here, and you can also put it in full screen if you wish. When you are done, you can click next activity here, and that will take you to the next activity. So this is an example from module 1 SLT, and this is an example from task 2.4 for EAL SEND-Co's from module 2. So you can see what it looks like. There's different readings here, and this is about a plan for EAL and SEND. And as you can see, as I mentioned before, there's the optional section here, and you can decide if that's for you and your contact dictates that you engage with it or not. Okay. Next, and the same is here. So I've got a few examples, but I think you get the idea from this how this works. So I'll move on now. other thing is we mentioned the videos. Now, this is an example of what we call an interactive video. So if you start playing it, at one point, the video will stop. So we saw that on the screen here, and now you would be able to click these and download the document relevant to your role. There are other ones here. So here again, it's this is another download, and occasionally, I think at the end we've got a pause and reflect question. So essentially, you'll be asked a couple of questions to consider in your own time, and then you can just keep playing the video to advance. Okay. Then there are the hotspot activities, of which I was talking about. So every module 1 and 2, starts with a hotspot activity where you get an overview of what's coming up in that module. So if you click on the I buttons, this will open, and then you can also play this, and that's going to play the same message if you want to engage it in that way. Here's another example of this. This is from the EAL Coordinators and SEND course about the 4 categories of SEND. So you can see the same here. On some of these, you will also see included videos within these pop-up windows or links and other content as well. But essentially, that's how it works. This is an example of a drag and drop activity. So you can simply drag these onto here. And then when you've done with that, so you can keep going, and then you can click check to check if this particular activity actually checks for understanding of the previous messaging, but obviously so this is a sort of a true and false sort of activity in a way, but there are other ones as well. And here we have another drag and drop. This is what appropriate actions to eliminate barriers. You've got 3 boxes here, as you can see, and in this particular case, these choices, there's more at the bottom, they can actually go in more than one box. And again, then you'll get feedback by clicking check at the end. Okay. And then let me just see. Right. And here is an example of the documents. So you've got a PDF document here. This is so let me just scroll this up to the top so we can see the top here. That's right. So that's a whole school audit tool from the SLT course. Yes, that's right. And you can do this straight on here, and you can type here your responses, and then you can simply, there's a couple of icons right on top here. One of them is a disk one, so you can save it once you've completed it here, and you can also print this using the printer button. So that way you don't need to leave the course in order to actually complete this. So that's another one. And if I just close this, we have just a few left. This is another one, but this one is simply a PDF, just to read and familiarize yourself with. This is not editable. So there are these 2 different kinds. Okay. Now I'm just going to try and move this. So we've got just a few left there. I think that's the same one actually. Right, so at the end of the course for the EAL coordinators and SEND codes, we have a case study activity where you can choose a number of sort of case study scenarios, pupil descriptions of pupils, and then we ask you to apply the framework below to to set out your actions. So you gather information, conduct assessments, make a referral, and create provision. And so you can, again, you can edit this and use it just as you have done before. And this is an example of one of these case studies, year 7 design, and you've got some information here. And so you can choose from one of these case studies. And that is the last task on the course, on the EAL and SEND course. And so finally, as I mentioned, this is our feedback form, very short. Right at the beginning, it asks you whether you're a senior leader or EAL coordinator or SENDCO, and then there's a couple of more questions that follow. And once you've done that, you can access the certificate. And the downloading is very, very simple. You just click View Certificate, and it will be generated for you. And so that's hopefully it gives you an idea what the course actually looks like. And just one more thing, I'll go back to my presentation and just take you very, very briefly through how to access the course. And then I think we'll have time for some questions. So if I just put it right. So how to access the course. So I showed you that there's a link to free on-demand courses on the Bell Foundation website there. So you would go for that, and that will take you to that page, and then there are those links, and that will take you to our Moodle site. Alternatively, if you have your smartphone on you now, you could use this QR code to visit the same page. So I just give it a couple of seconds. Remember that you are also getting the recording of this webinar tomorrow, so you could use that recording to do the same and access that page. Okay, now once you are on Moodle, if you do not have an account with us, you would need to create an account, and then you can self-enroll yourself. So the registration is very, very simple. And I'm just going to show you on the next slide, and I think that's the last slide before questions, what this would look like. So when you get to the front page of Moodle, you can click on the login link that you will see in the top right corner of the screen, and then a part of the window that comes up will be create a new account. So you can create a new account. Obviously, if you already have an account, then you can simply just log in. Once you've done that, you will see the courses available to you. You would choose the category free on-demand training, and you will see the link to this particular course. And then if you click that link, it will take you to the enrollment page, and all it takes is to just click the Enroll Me button, and you're in the course. And I think that's about it. And so now we are going to move to questions. So thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Glynis and Camille. There's been so much interest coming in the chat. We'll only have a couple of minutes for questions, so I'm trying to prioritise those that have come up repeatedly. So the one that's come up a number of times is around where somebody has got dual roles. So if you're EAL lead and SLT, should you do both versions of the course, and will you actually be able to access both versions of the course? Camille, do you want to answer that one?
Well, yeah, I think likely you would, as long as you have the time, because we're talking about time for teachers, of course. So that's but yes, and absolutely, you can enroll yourself in both. In fact, when I was just showing you these pages just now, I was basically enrolled in both of the courses as a user. So that's how. If you are not a user, if you are one of us, you can't download the certificates, for example. So only yes, so absolutely, you can access them both. Remember that module 1 is actually the same and then there's a difference between module 2. But yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. And that was another question that came up was if there was any content that was the same, but then it does become adapted for role. Do other members of SLT need to do the course? Glynis, is that one that you can
Yes,
answer?
I mean, I think so. I think really it depends on, what you're responsible for on the SLT. I think if this falls into your broad area of responsibility, perhaps you've got oversight on SEND, on provision for multilingual learners in your school, then I think if any of that falls within your role, definitely I think you can benefit from sort of insight and information. I mean, I would, I would say if it's not at all in your role, perhaps, or you might feel that just doing the course where other colleagues might not have time and you can, pass on the knowledge and information. Yeah, I think you will gain from it.
Fabulous, thank you. Anna and Fiona, this might be one that's best answered by one or both of you. We've had a couple of people. You can obviously come on turn on your cameras, Anna and Fiona. Hi.
Hi. Hi.
We've had a couple of people asking if it would be appropriate for TAs to do this course, TAs who are working with EAL learners.
I think it'd be excellent for TAs who work day in, day out with EAL learners to have that knowledge and understanding of the whole school systems and where they can make referrals through the EAL coordinator or SENCO so that they know what helps with early identification.
Fab, thanks, Fiona. Another question, I know Glynis has answered this one in the Q&A, but just in case anybody else, it's relevant to anybody else. Is the course suitable for people in Scotland as we have a different school system and legislation to England? Glynis, do you want to just briefly explain that one?
Yeah, so just, I think we're drawing on sort of English, for example, the SEND Code of Practice, that would be specific to England. But I think the course is about much more than that. Really, it's about principles and approaches that we think would, appropriate anywhere. Things like what are the language barriers to look at? For example, interpreters working with families. I think that's generalizable. I think that's really helpful and concrete, wherever you might be in the UK.
And that's exactly the same. Alison has just put in a message that she's in Wales, and we have this sort of similar issue comes up now and again. There are slight differences, but I think as Glynis has outlined, that generally it will be relevant for everybody in terms of the principles. There was another question that came in during the week, and administrators have started mixing EAL and learning support classes together. Now, this is a question that was from a European school, not a school in the UK. In my perspective, this is being done to save costs. But EAL and LS specialists believe student needs are too disparate to be effectively addressed in a mixed classroom. Now, they are asking what current research says about this. I don't know if, I think, Fiona, were you going to share your ideas on this one?
Yeah, we identified there's a document with research from 2014, didn't we? We can put that the link into the chat where they looked at the kind of cultural diverse aspects of what's beneficial and what not. So that's the only one I could find really from 2014, and it's on the Bell's website. But from my own experience, it really does depend on the learner needs. So I have had really good success with multilingual learners within a kind of nurture SEND cohort if they've got SEND indicators as well. But I've also had that as a cost-effective approach where you've had neurodiverse students who've struggled with social relationships but really benefited by helping and supporting language acquisition for multilingual learners who are learning language and vice versa. So there's been kind of some reciprocal friendships from that. and boosted self-esteem as well, and some shared approaches around inclusion. So it can really work. It depends on the learner needs. If the SEND needs are so diverse around sensitivity, lights, noise, and an EAL classroom needs that talking out loud, then that might not be beneficial to SEND. So it really does come on an individual class basis and the context of the class, the teacher's skills and abilities to adapt that, and the school approach really. And if it is not working, then that should be referred to the SENCO immediately, or to the SLT to look at that. So there's not a barrier for either a SEND learner or an EAL learner with SEND indicators. Hopefully that answers some of that.
Thanks. That was a really helpful response. Thank you, Fiona. I'm afraid we're not going to have time for any more questions. There's just a couple more slides to whiz through really quickly to let you know some other things that are coming up from the Bell Foundation. I will take a look at the other questions, and if there are ones that we can answer easily, I'll put the answers in the response that go out to in the email tomorrow. So just to let you know that the next webinar that's coming up is for Refugee Week, so you can sign up there. We're really excited about this one. It's a panel event, and it's Radha Chakraborty will be hosting it. She's our the chair of our trustees, and we've got a fabulous panel including schools, schools of sanctuary, and we'll be really showcasing great ideas around social inclusion. We're really keen to collect questions ahead of the session, so if you do have any ideas of questions that you'd like to pose to the panel, please do send those to us when you have a chance. And then the next slide is just a reminder of the other courses that are also free and available as free on demand courses. So we have the introduction to EAL assessment, and we also have modules for early career teachers as well. And there's a QR code to go with that one as well. So they're both available in the same area. So from the training tab that Camille showed you a moment ago. And then we run, if you're interested in training with an actual tutor, this is not free training. These are the online courses that the Bell Foundation runs with our own trainers. So we've got the teaching assistants courses coming up in June, and introduction to EAL assessment is coming up in September. And you can find details about those courses from the website as well. And finally, if you are interested in accessing regional training, we have scaling partners who run our courses in their own areas, either face-to-face or online. And if you go to the website, you'll see this map. You'll be able to click on it, and you will see that it's divided up into regions. You click on your own region, and then you'll be able to see the list of the scaling partners who are working in that region, and also the different courses that are available. So if you click a bit further on there, Camille, that would be great. Fabulous, thank you. So you can see some of the courses. So even where our offer, might be much smaller, part of our scaling work is that our licensed practitioners are running the training in schools, online as open access courses. So do take a look, particularly this time of year where schools are planning their CPD for next year. And I think that brings us to the end. Just to say an enormous thank you to everybody for joining us, and an absolutely massive thank you to Anna and Fiona, Glynis and Camille for such a useful webinar. And a reminder that this has been recorded, and we will share the link to the recording together with any links that have been shared tomorrow by email to everybody who signed up. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.